Good morning, everyone. I have a question. Are you in control of your data? And by that I mean, are you using Apple Cloud? Or are you using Instagram or Facebook to share your stories, your memories, things that defines you? Are you aware that there are websites that actually scraps the internet for all your social media content? And are you aware that there are websites where you can just drop a picture of someone and literally trace back where they have been? I'm a cryptographer and I'm a photographer. So in that sense, I'm very, very mindful of privacy, who has access to my data, where my data is. I started working on the internet and so on in 2008. 6 years later, I've been to engineering school. And so I was trying to find a solution to that problem recently when I started doing photography. Where can I place my data? And I really wanted something that I could use myself, be comfortable using myself. And that's where I found Litchi. Litchi is a self-hosted, written in PHP, because that's my favorite language, management photo system. It's an open source project, so I could contribute. I could look at the code. I could actually tweak it to fit my needs. Here is my first change on it, removing bad practices. No, it's not writing it back to Java. But by doing that, I actually made my first step in the world of open source. And then I was like, the code is crap. How can I make it better while still doing PHP? And so I looked around, and I found Laravel. Out of graduate school, it's great. Like, you have all those knowledge, notions, and so on, but you don't really have the experience. And so with Laravel, I actually learned to use MVC, Model View Controller, where you actually can trace the use of the request, going through the middlewares, through the controller, using object relation models, and so on. So that really gave me a real-world experience in that regard. I also spent a lot of time on YouTube learning. And that's where the first benefit of open source comes from. It's in the curiosity. Because you're doing something for yourself. You're trying to face problems, but it's not for you, it's not for the company. So it's really something that triggers you, that motivates you, and you look around. When I was working on Litchi, I was like, OK, I want to try a new front end. And I found Livewire. Livewire is basically, you send a request to the server, you get HTML back, and you replace it in your page. Livewire has a very different approach to opening bugs. You don't create issues on Livewire. You actually open pull requests. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'm learning there. By opening pull requests, the pull request that you have to open is an actual bug, but you try to exhibit a behavior that is breaking. So the developer cannot say, but it works on my machine. And that has some really cool benefits. First of all, you have a failing test. And then what comes after a failing test, you fix it. So we are already in the first step of doing test-driven development, red, green, and blue if you want to do refactoring. And so basically, from this, I got inspired, and that gave me new best practices. Because by doing that, I actually do it now at work. A coworker has something failing, I ask him, what is the request that you send me? Give me that JSON back so I can send it to my application and see what's going wrong. So from that, I get new best practices. Taylor Otwell, the creator of Laravel, has a very, very beautiful quote. The time I leveled up the most are the time when I was friend with or work with someone that was much better than me, much smarter than me. I really resonate with that. 3 years ago, when I was working on Litchi, we had this engineer who was doing embedded safety critical software in Germany. And he was like, OK, we need to push further. And with him, we got the code coverage back to 80%. We got static analysis. We actually have our own rules, very strict, way more strict than what you would do usually in PHP. And so that's basically pushing me further. And those are practices that I directly apply at work. I joined ABN AMRO 3 years ago. And my first task was actually to create the registration authority in Java, which I hadn't touched for 6 years. And I was like, OK, I have this amazing knowledge from my open source project, and can I directly transfer that into Java? Because to me, PHP, Java, it's the same thing. It's just language. The idea behind it is just the same. And so that's where you gain also another thing by doing open source. You try multiple things, and you gain versatility. Because you're no longer targeting one language. You're also trying other things. You try Go, TypeScript, JavaScript, plenty of stuff. A year ago, I switched to a new team, Secure Coding. They had this crazy cool project, which is a huge regex parser that is applied on all the commits of the bank. The idea is find secrets. Find where API keys, where hard-coded passwords are, so we can identify them and rotate them. This code is open source. You can go on the GitHub of ABN AMRO, and you will be able to access everything on it. With my experience as an open source developer, I actually told them, hey, we need to fill up the best practice website. This is a website that gives you an idea of how good a project is. And you have multiple passing grades. You have green passing, silver, and gold. And depending on the level you're looking for, you have different requirements. For silver, for example, you need to have 80% code coverage. But for gold, you need to have 90. When was your last cryptographic review? All those kind of things that you have to check yourself. And one of the nice things is David Wheeler, the creator of that, actually created also an action. So that's a GitHub action that you can directly use on your repository. And it does some checks for you. Here, you see that, for example, we don't have dangerous workflows. We don't have vulnerabilities. We are using binary artifacts. We have code reviews and so on. And it also checks, like, is your artifact being signed? All those kind of systems. So by joining that team and with my knowledge of open source, I brought expertise. And that's what you're doing when you're contributing, because you're improving your knowledge. 6 months ago, we started working on a new project, Victim. I'll not tell you what it is about, but new project means grid field. That's exciting. Now, I had tried lots of things, Vue 3 and so on, and so that's what things like I can use now. I can try to steer the team in directions. And so we had to choose a new language. Python, Java, or Go. Python was quickly discarded because not static typing, it's not fast, so all was left between Java and Go. In the end, we went for the shiny Go, but it's a complete switch of mindset. You're trying new things. And so by doing pet project, you actually get insight. You try things. You can say, oh, I know this could fit this team. This could fit this project. And you give things that matters then later at work. You're no longer guessing. ABN AMRO is doing a big push at the moment on the engineering culture. If you talk to upper management, they will tell you you need to follow the 3x3 matrix. It is about people, processes, and tool, like all those management consulting things. However, our CIO, Andrei Linchenko, had a very interesting quotes, and above all those, people matter the most. And I think it's very interesting that our CIO is only focusing on one part rather than just everything. And I very much like that, because to me, engineering culture is the way you work, your mindset, your attitude. Those to me are critical to the idea. By engineering culture, ABN AMRO is pushing for inner sourcing. Inner sourcing is a big dream because it means that you get developers to work for free on your project. In reality, it's not that easy because most companies don't really take the time to make your project accessible for other people to join. They don't have nicely documented README, they don't have contribution guide, they don't have all those designs. Oh, I have a nice setup, I can just run Docker and then everything is gone. So the idea here is facilitate. Because I was involved with my knowledge in the development of the inner sourcing, and I gave them all those tips like, hey, think about this when you're trying to contribute. I've got these reviews, how do I answer it? I answer it by giving a link to the commit that I fixed it. The other day, I was very annoyed because working on Python, I was facing this flake error. You have 2 spaces missing there, and like it's always those modifications which are very much annoying. And I was like, oh, can I fix that? And so I looked around on the internet, and I was like, oh, there is rough, that's great. Also, it provides other analysis for bugs. But how can I make it not just for me, but for all the bank? So at that point, I have 2 choices. The first choice is contact the head of the Python and then tell him, like, hey, can we make that? And then go to an agreement. And then at the bank, we have this huge pipeline where everyone has to use the same pipeline to make sure that we follow regulation and so on. And so my idea was to integrate that into this pipeline. So I could ask the team that managed that, and then we put that into the backboard, we do the story points, and then 2 sprints later, it's actually starting to be developed, and 4 sprints later, we have it in production. Or I can actually do that myself. I created a pull request directly to that repository, and I made the change. 2 weeks later, it was accepted. We're rolling. The idea here is by doing open source, you switch your mindset. You're no longer requesting and waiting. You're actively producing, helping. There is a nice quote that is often used. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. It's very abstract, because what are the goals, what are the systems? There is a speaker, Chris Williamson, who has a paraphrase of it. You don't rise to the standard you have when others are watching. You fall to the standard you have when no one is watching. The only works that really matters is the works that no one sees. And to me, that part is really, that's for me the open source. The works that matter to me is really the open source part, because that's where I actually gain more. That's where I'm learning more efficiently than when I'm at work. So in summary, by contributing to open source, you're unlocking new skills, you're learning new best practices, you're improving your versatility to change from one language to another. You're no longer I-shaped, you're T-shaped. You are able to give educated insight when you have to choose new technologies. And finally, it's a switching mindset from requesting to proactive, which is way more exciting. So, in one word, contribute. For those interested, here's a slide where you can take pictures for the links of the that are presented in the presentation. And I see someone still taking a picture, so. And that's it. Thank you for your attention. And if you have questions, please find me.